What's going on, guys? Nick from Source Strength. I want to make a quick video today. I want to talk about 5 things that I wish somebody would have told me when I first started deadlifting. It's just 5 things that I've along the way that I've learned through a lot of hardship and a lot of frustration. And then really anybody who wants to learn how to deadlift should go by these 5 things. So it's going to be a new style of video. I'm going to break up into 5 little sections. If you like that format, comment, like, subscribe below. All right, so for tip number 1, I want to talk about having the bar over the middle of your foot, or bar over midfoot. So no maximal load will leave the ground until the bar is directly placed in the middle of your foot. If you have pulled a bar not over the middle of your foot, it wasn't a max load. So that goes back to just like science and gravity. You're the most balanced in the middle of your body. That's where you're going to generate the most power. So when you're initiating your deadlift setup, that should be the number 1 thing on your mind. Look down at the bar and see that the bar is placed directly over the middle of your foot. If you're not sure where that is, you could look at your foot from a side angle or measure your foot, or however you want to do it. But you need to find out exactly where that is, because for a long time I wasn't pulling the bar over the middle of my foot. When you pull the bar over the middle of your foot and you bring your shins to the bar, it'll set your specific hip height, hip angle, shin angle, and torso angle or torso lean. So without getting too complicated with it, because it can be complicated with the deadlift, but the way to make it very simple is just place the bar over the middle of your foot. No maximal load can be pulled from your toes. If you did, it wasn't a maximal load. All right, on to tip number 2. Okay, tip number 2. There are many ways to deadlift. You have sumo and you have conventional. You have wide stance conventional, narrow, wide sumo or narrow sumo. There's a lot of ways to get set up. There's a lot of ways to get yourself into a position. But there's a few standards for deadlifting. No matter which way you pull, it has to follow one standard. So tip number one is placing the bar over the middle of your foot. Number 2 is that your back has to be flat. If your back is rounded, you're not going to pull the maximal amount of weight. So it doesn't matter what way that you deadlift, the bar has to be over the middle of your foot and your back has to be flat. Your lats have to be tight. And then number 3 would be that your hips are going to have to be a little bit higher than what you think. Everybody's different. Everybody's made different heights, different torso length, femur length versus shin length. So there's no one way to deadlift. And there's a lot of ways to get set up. Some people like to use the barbell as a counterbalance and sit back really far. None of those things are wrong. And the people who have pulled the most amount of weight have done it a lot of different ways. But the one thing that they all have in common is that the bar is over midfoot, that their upper back is flat, and that their hips are high. If you don't believe me about the high hips, take a video and record yourself pulling a maximum load. If your hips are low, you'll pull, nothing will happen to the barbell, your hips will shift into a position, and then you'll deadlift. So take a minute when you deadlift and record yourself, and you'll see that all 3 of those things have to happen to be a maximal 1 rep max pull. Okay, so tip number 3 would be not to go too heavy. And this is something that I still struggle with. I think everybody struggles with. But when you go too heavy, there's a lot of things that happen. So number 1, when you go too heavy, is you're not giving yourself a chance to recover. Most of us work normal jobs. Most of us can't eat exactly how we want to, and most of us don't get to sleep exactly how as many hours per night that we want. So when you're pulling heavy, you're really taxing your nervous system. Don't freak out about your CNS or whatever, but when you're pulling too heavy, you're not giving yourself a chance to recover. So if you can only deadlift 225, you could deadlift 220 every single day, 5 days in a row, and you'll recover. But as you get stronger and stronger and stronger, and the weights get heavier, it's too hard to recover from maximal loads. If you talk to anybody and I kind of like to narrow into people like myself who are natural, so obviously no steroids, but I kind of like to take it a step further where I don't have protein and creatine and stuff like that. I just eat food, and I think that's the people I like to talk to or funnel my information to. But all this stuff will apply for everybody. So as you increase your weights and your percentages and you start pulling 450 and 500 and 600, pulling something that's 90% or heavy, sometimes will take you 7 days, 10 days, 14 days to recover from. And you'll find yourself going to the gym and, man, 405 felt way heavier than it should have today. Well, track back to 3 weeks ago and then 2 weeks ago when you pulled heavy. So that's kind of something you have to play with, and what's heavy for you, because it's all relative. Once you start getting stronger, even the light weights are heavy weights. But try to work with like sub-maximal deadlifts. That way you give yourself a chance to recover. And then you're also, when you're working with lighter weights, it really gives you a chance to dial in your form and find out what exactly is your weak points. And you can expose that, attack that, make that better. So when you go heavy, then you're better. And you really should only be doing a 1 rep max. I say 0 times per year, but even I don't do that. So if you have a competition coming up, or if you're just a casual lifter, you want to test your strength, that's something that I would only recommend probably every 4 to 5 months, because you'll do so much better pulling 80% for 3 or 4 reps than pulling 90 for 1, because it's just going to tax you too much. In the grand scheme, it's just not worth it. So that would be tip number 3. Don't go too heavy. That when you deadlift, you need to have the biggest range of motion that you can possibly have. I don't pull sumo, and I have no problem with people who pull sumo. But I'm gonna tell you a couple, facts. Is that if you take somebody who's 6'9" and they're pulling a narrow conventional stance, and they're pulling the bar the equivalent of 5 feet just to lock it out, and then you take somebody who's 5'1" and they're pulling sumo, are they pulling 2 feet to lock it out, or 3 feet? So if you think about it like that, that the biggest range of motion that you have will put the most tension on the muscles, will make the muscles work for longer, and it'll make them work harder. So you don't want to cheat yourself any opportunity that you get, right? So like if you could eat healthy and you had healthy food, you wouldn't just throw it away and eat McDonald's, because you don't want to cheat yourself, and it's the same thing. So you should stand as narrow as you possibly can. I stand with a wide stance. If you watch my videos, it looks pretty wide, but for me, that's as narrow as I can go before my back starts to round. So your stance doesn't matter, it matters about your back, right? So if you can stand really, really close and your back can be flat, you have the biggest range of motion possible. It's a harder lift for you, but you're building the most amount of muscle. And the only thing that I have with sumo is that it's kind of hamstring and glute dominant, and it does work your lower back. But when you pull conventional, you're working your rectors more and your lats more, and just your whole back in general, just because it's a longer range of motion. You're bent over more, so you have to use your back muscles more, and that's going to translate to your squatting strength, the ability to keep your torso tight, or if you're high bar, to keep your torso in line. And you can equivalent those things to having a conventional deadlift. If you look at somebody who pulls sumo, it's a short range of motion, and most times they can pull like 200 pounds more than they can squat when you get to like an elite level. And if you look at somebody who pulls conventional, their squat and their deadlift aren't too far off, 70, 80 pounds. I mean, there's the exceptions to the rule, but this is just for people who are kind of just starting out with deadlifts, or maybe people who are a little bit into deadlifting already and they're having some issues or they don't really know where to start. I'd always recommend starting conventional to make the biggest range of motion possible. That's going to build you the most amount of muscle in the bigger back, and the bigger back you have, the more you can deadlift, the more you can squat, the more you can bench, the more you can overhead, the more you can do anything. You've never met a weak person with a big back, but you've met a lot of people with a small back who are weak. So that's it for tip number 4. All right, so tip number 5 is going to be to pull double overhand. This is something, when I first started deadlifting, I used to just pull mixed grip all the time. And I'll tell you why I didn't like it. But first, I'll tell you why I think you should pull double overhand. It's going to build up your grip strength, which is going to make you better at deadlifting. But when you're pulling double overhand, you have a great opportunity to keep your back flat and to lock your lats in as tight as you can. When you start pulling mixed grip, you have one arm like this and one arm like this. And if you look in the camera, this shoulder is higher than this shoulder. So when we go to get tight and we squeeze our lats in to create this angle with our back, one side is going to be a little bit higher than the other. You think that's not a big deal, but then when you start pulling maximal loads, it's going to cause you just a little bit to round over. And just a little bit is the difference between you pulling a PR and not. I feel like with the double overhand, when you can't pull anymore, if you just use straps, you can still keep your lats tight. And then, so there's no difference than when I deadlift 135 than when I do a maximal pull. And if you're somebody who pulls double overhand for as long as they can, and then they go mixed grip, you're deadlifting two different ways. So you either have to go mixed grip all the time, which is, I don't recommend that at all, or just pull double overhand and use straps. Like I said, it's just for the back thing. There are people that deadlift with a rounded upper back, but to be fair, those people don't deadlift anymore, or they don't deadlift for long and then they stop. And the people who have pulled the biggest amount of weight off the floor in the world all pull double overhand, and they all use straps, and they don't go mixed grip. So that's just something to think about, and maybe something to learn from. This is just my idea. But yeah, I just feel a lot stronger when I pull double overhand, and I see a lot of translation. Like, I see my grip strength get stronger every single week, and then I can replicate the same position every single time that I deadlift. So that's why I would say pull double overhand. All right, guys, that wraps it up. That is 5 things if I can travel back in the future and tell myself about deadlifting when I first started. I think those 5 things, whether you pull sumo or conventional, or you're natural or not natural, or you like to pull like this and he likes to pull like that, I think those 5 things across the board are probably the biggest 5 things that you need to pay attention to, at least. You don't have to do them all, but those are 5 things that I feel like that make sense, that I've seen, and I've literally spent hours and hours and hours and hours looking at my own deadlifts, trying to make them better every time I go to the gym, and then spending a lot of hours doing research and looking up things. And I feel like that those 5 things are the most important 5 things. They don't have to be, live and die by those things, but if I could travel back in time, I would tell myself those 5 things. So I wanted to share that with you guys. If you like this style of video, let me know in the comment section down below. Comment, subscribe. If there's a certain style of video or certain things that you guys want to see, just let me know. You can always, if you don't already follow me on Instagram, it's soars_strength. I'll leave down below a link for that. But yeah, I really enjoy doing these videos, and I want to help you guys out the most I can. So if there's a certain format or certain thing you want to see, let me know in the comment section below. Until then, appreciate it, guys. Thank you.